Scientists say the UK is entering the deadliest phase of its coronavirus outbreak. Cases of COVID-19 in Britain have soared past 56,000. The death toll is now well over 6,000. Ministers are now debating how long the UK can afford to remain shut down. The 3-week lockdown to curb the spread of the virus is due to end on Monday. London Mayor Sadiq Khan says the country is in no position to lift the tough restrictions. At the same time, Prime Minister Boris Johnson is in stable condition after spending a third day in intensive care in a London hospital. The 55-year-old tested positive for COVID-19 nearly 2 weeks ago. Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab has been directing the UK's fight against the outbreak while Mr Johnson is recovering. Ollie Barrett joins us from London for more on this. Ollie, will the Prime Minister be spending a third night in ICU?
It looks very likely indeed. We've just had an update from Downing Street on the Prime Minister's condition, and they say that he is responding to treatment. That is the first time we have heard that from Downing Street in terms of his condition since he entered intensive care on Monday. So certainly good news, some grounds for cautious optimism, but he remains in intensive care, so his condition is clearly still serious. Downing Street also telling us that he is still in a stable condition and that he remains in good spirits. So as I say, some grounds for cautious optimism that Boris Johnson is actually getting better now. But as I say, he remains in ICU, so no one's getting ahead of themselves just yet. And clearly once he does leave intensive care, if and when that happens, he's going to need something of a significant period of convalescence when he does.
Ollie, the number of deaths has been steadily climbing, with the toll doubling every 3 to 4 days. Now, is the United Kingdom any closer to the peak of its outbreak?
Officials here do believe that we will probably see the outbreak peak around this weekend, perhaps a few days after that. Officials are also making it very clear that deaths are a lagging indicator, and so while we may hit the peak of the outbreak in the UK and the population as a whole, we will potentially see a few days after that peak of death numbers continuing to rise. So certainly we are being warned here in Britain to expect some quite high numbers in terms of fatalities over the coming days. At the same time, we have seen, if you look at the trend over the last 3, 4, 5 days rather than the last 24 hours, some suggestions that the actual rise in the number of deaths per day might be slowing, which would be good news. And officials also believe there is some green shoots, as they describe it, appearing in some of the other data like hospital admissions, new cases and so on. They believe that the lockdown measures that are in place, have been in place for over 2 weeks, are starting now to feed in. So we hope to see that as well in the numbers in the days to come.
Well, given that the numbers sort of are steadily increasing, though, will we be seeing the nationwide lockdown extended?
It looks likely now. The government said that the lockdown was initially for 3 weeks, which would end on Monday and would then be reviewed. But government ministers are now being cautious about whether that review will even take place. The reason for that is that the scientists continue to say here in Britain that you cannot even consider reviewing the lockdown measures that are in place until you are sure that you are past the peak. It's unlikely, even if we do see a peak in Britain at the weekend, that we will know that that is the peak, and we will know that we are past the peak by Monday. So the scientists are certainly suggesting that it'll be a little while yet before the actual lockdown can be considered. And part of the reason they don't want that discussed too much at the moment is that they want to make it very clear that over this weekend in Britain, which could well be very warm and sunny, that people stay indoors and continue to follow the guidance, so they don't relax because they think the lockdown is imminently ending.
All right, Mayor, thanks for that update. Ollie Barrett speaking to us from London.